Magic, White and Black, the science on finite and infinite life. Those who believe that everything exists in consequence of the unconscious attraction of two principles forget that there could be no attraction if there were not some continually acting cause that produces that attraction. They are the deluded followers of a doctrine which they themselves cannot seriously believe. They agree that out of nothing, nothing can come, and yet they believe that unconscious attraction can produce consciousness. They are the followers of the absurd two, which has no real existence, because the eternal one divided into two parts would not become two ones, but the two halves of a divided one. One is the number of unity, and two is division. The one divided into two ceases to exist as a one, and nothing new is thereby produced. If the plan for the construction of the world had been made according to the ideas of the followers of dualism, nothing could have come into existence, because action and reaction would have been of equal power, annihilating each other. Neither could there be any progression under such circumstances at present. But behind all manifestations of power there is the eternal power itself, the source of all perfection that can become manifest. This is the unity and reality in which no division exists, from which all things originate and to which all will return. In its aspect as being the source of perfection in everything and which all things desire to attain, it has been called good. Whatever this power of good may be, it is beyond the capacity of man to give it an appropriate name or to describe it, because it is beyond the comprehension of mortal man. To give a name to that which includes everything is to limit the whole to one of its parts. It has been called God, and as such it has many faces, because its aspect differs according to the standpoint from which we behold it. It is the supreme cause from which everything comes into existence. It must be absolute consciousness, wisdom and power, love, intelligence and life, because these attributes exist in its manifestations and could not have come into existence without it. It is necessarily one and unlimited, and can therefore not be known to the limited intellect of man. It can only be known by itself, but if it reveals itself in our soul will partake of its knowledge. Therefore Angelus Silesius says, God dwelleth in a light far out of human ken. Become thyself that light, and thou shalt see him then. When Gautama Buddha was asked to describe the supreme source of all beings, he remained silent, because those who have reached a state in which they can realize what it is have no words to describe it, and those who cannot realize it would not be able to comprehend the description. To describe a thing, we must invest it with comprehensible attributes, and it then ceases to be unlimited and becomes limited. Therefore, all theological discussions about the nature of God are useless, because God is the all and does not differ from anything. But not everything is God, because not everything is conscious of its own divine nature. To become conscious of one's own divine nature is to realize the presence of God. To deny the existence of God is an absurdity equivalent to denying one's own existence, while existence is its own proof. He can only be spiritually known but not scientifically described, and the fight between so-called deists and atheists is a mere quarrel about words which have no definite meaning. Every man is himself a manifestation of God, and as each man's character differs from that of every other, so each man's idea of God differs from that of the rest, and each one has a God, an ideal of his own. Only when they all have the same aspirations will they all have the same God. To him who has not the power of God, the power of God does not exist. To him who perceives the presence of God, God exists, and to him his existence cannot be disputed away. The ignorant cannot be made to realize the existence of knowledge unless he becomes knowing. Those who know cannot have their knowledge reasoned away. The caricatures of God set up by the various churches as representations of the only true God are merely attempts to describe that which cannot be described. As every man has a highest ideal, a God of his own which is a symbol of his aspirations, so every church has its peculiar God, who is an outgrowth or a product of evolution of the ideal necessities of that collective body called a church. They are all true gods to them because they temporarily answer their needs, and as the requirements of the church change, so change their gods. Old gods are discarded and new ones put into their places. The God of the Christian differs from that of the Jews, and the Christian God of the 19th century is very different from the one that lived at the time of Torquemada and Peter Arbues, and was pleased with torture and autos da fe. As long as men are imperfect, their gods will be imperfect. As they become more perfect, their gods will grow in perfection. And when all men are equally perfect, they will all have the same perfect God, the same highest spiritual ideal recognized alike by science and by religion as being divinity and humanity. Because there can be only one supreme ideal, one absolute truth, whose realization is wisdom, whose manifestation is power expressed in nature, and whose most perfect expression is ideal man. There are 7 steps on the ladder representing the religious development of mankind. On the first stage, man resembles an animal, conscious only of his instincts and bodily desires without any conception of the divine element. On the second, he begins to have a presentiment of the existence of something higher. On the third, he begins to seek for that higher element, but his lower elements are still preponderating over the higher aspirations. On the fourth, his lower and higher desires are counterbalancing each other. At times he seeks for the higher, at other times he is again attracted to the lower. On the fifth, he anxiously seeks for the divine, but seeking it in the external, he cannot find it. He then begins to seek for it within himself. On the sixth, he finds the divine element within himself and develops spiritual self-consciousness, which on the seventh grows into self-knowledge. Having arrived at the sixth, his spiritual senses begin to become alive and active, and he will then be able to recognize the presence of other spiritual entities existing on the same plane. On the seventh he finds that he himself is the God which he has been seeking. His will is free from every selfish desire, his thought is one with his will, his word becomes a creative act. Such a spiritual being may still dwell in a human body upon this planet and not even be recognized as something superior to the rest of mankind. For his personality is not God. He lives, and yet he lives not, for it is God, his divine self, the eternal reality living in him.